I was 24 when I realized my family would never truly see me. My sister Jessica unwrapped keys to a $60,000 BMW with a giant red bow while I received a $2 piggy bank. This moment crystallized years of being the overlooked daughter. After sneaking out at 2 a.m. with my father's vintage Mustang, I received his threatening voicemail demanding I return it or face theft charges. Before you hear what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to follow my journey to rebuilding my life after walking away from everything. Growing up in Highland Park, one of Chicago's most affluent suburbs, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. Our sprawling Tudor-style mansion with its manicured gardens was the perfect backdrop for my parents' carefully curated life. My father, Richard, was a founding partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, while my mother, Diana, came from old money and dedicated her life to maintaining our family's social standing. From early childhood, the contrast between how my parents treated my sister Jessica and me was painfully obvious. Jessica, 4 years older than me, was the golden child who could do no wrong. She excelled at everything my parents valued. She graduated summa cum laude from Yale Law School, following directly in our father's footsteps. By 28, she had secured an associate position at his firm with a clear path to partnership. Her recent engagement to Bradley Whitmore, son of my father's golf buddies and fellow legal dynasty, was the crowning achievement in my parents' eyes. I, on the other hand, was the family disappointment. While Jessica embraced the path laid out for her, I developed a passion for documentary photography that mystified my achievement-oriented family. "Photography is a hobby, not a career," my father would say dismissively whenever I showed him my work. When it came time for college, I rejected my father's alma mater and chose a state university with an excellent film program. This decision ignited the first major battle in our household. I still remember my mother's face contorted with disgust as she said, "No Winthrop has ever attended a public university. You're tarnishing our family name for some artistic fantasy." My mother's criticism was constant and cutting. If I wore something too casual to a family dinner, "Sabrina, couldn't you have made an effort? Jessica always looks so put together." If I shared news about a photography project, "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to pursue something substantial?" Every choice I made was wrong in her eyes, from my hairstyle to my career aspirations. My father wasn't openly cruel like my mother, but his emotional absence cut just as deeply. He simply didn't see me unless he was expressing disappointment. While he attended every one of Jessica's moot court competitions and celebrated her victories with expensive dinners, he never once came to any of my photography exhibitions. When I won a regional award for a documentary short my junior year, he didn't even read the email I sent him about it. The pattern of favoritism was established early. For Jessica's Sweet 16, my parents threw an extravagant party at the country club with a live band and designer dress. When my 16th birthday rolled around, they were too busy with one of my father's cases and gave me a gift card to a department store. Jessica's graduation gifts included a European tour and a luxury apartment. Mine was a used camera that my mother made sure to point out was practical rather than extravagant, since you'll probably give up on this photography phase soon anyway. And the only person who ever made me feel valued in my family was my grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother. Unlike her son, Grandma Eleanor appreciated my artistic eye and rebellious spirit. She had been a painter in her youth before marrying into the Winthrop family, and she understood my need for creative expression. "You see the world differently, Sabrina," she would tell me as we looked through my photographs. "That's not something to apologize for. It's a gift." She would sneak me art books and vintage cameras, encouraging my passion when no one else would. When I was in high school, she even set up a darkroom in a corner of her carriage house where I could develop my film away from my mother's disapproving glare. Those afternoons with Grandma Eleanor were my sanctuary. But 2 years ago, Grandma Eleanor passed away, and I lost the only ally I had in the family. Her absence left a void that made family gatherings even more unbearable. Without her buffer, my parents' favoritism became even more pronounced. After college, I refused to take the easy corporate job my father tried to arrange for me. Instead, I pursued my passion as a freelance photographer and documentary filmmaker. The financial struggles were real. My small apartment in Wicker Park was a far cry from the luxury condo where Jessica lived, and I shared it with my best friend Zoe, a tattoo artist who had become more family to me than my blood relatives. Jessica never missed an opportunity to remind me of how disappointing my choices were. Sabrina, you could be making six figures at any number of firms with your family connections, she would say during our infrequent phone calls. Instead, you're shooting wedding photos and living with a roommate at 24. She never understood that I would rather struggle doing something meaningful than be comfortable doing something that slowly killed my spirit. Family gatherings were exercises in humiliation. Thanksgiving last year was particularly painful. My mother paraded Jessica and Bradley around to every relative, gushing about Jessica's recent legal victory in a high-profile case. When my aunt politely asked about my work, my mother interrupted before I could answer. Sabrina is still figuring things out. We're hoping she'll eventually pursue a graduate degree in something practical. These constant reminders of my inadequacy took their toll. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Levine, who helped me understand that my issues with self-worth stemmed from years of emotional neglect. Your feelings are valid, Sabrina, she would tell me during our sessions. You deserve to be celebrated for your unique gifts just as much as your sister. My boyfriend Marcus became another source of support. Coming from a warm, middle-class family where emotions were expressed openly and achievements, no matter how small, were celebrated, he couldn't quite comprehend the coldness of my family dynamic. They're still your family, he would say. Maybe they just don't know how to connect with you. Marcus's optimism was both his most endearing quality and the source of our biggest disagreements. He believed in reconciliation and second chances. You should keep trying with them, he encouraged. Family is family. Despite my better judgment and against Dr. Levine's advice about setting boundaries, I decided to give my family one last chance by accepting their invitation to spend Christmas at the family estate. I spent hours creating thoughtful handmade gifts for everyone, including a carefully edited photo book of family moments from my parents and a custom illustration of Jessica's favorite childhood vacation spot for her. These gifts represented not just my creative skills, but hours of effort and emotion that I hoped would finally make them see me. As I packed my modest Honda Civic for the drive to Highland Park, Zoe gave me a tight hug. Remember, you can always come back here if it gets too much, she said, her eyes serious behind her purple-framed glasses. Your real family is the one that makes you feel loved. I nodded, but a small stubborn part of me still hoped that this time would be different. This time maybe they would finally see me. The 23rd of December was crisp and clear as I drove through the wrought iron gates of my parents' estate. Holiday decorations adorned every tree and shrub along the winding driveway, a tasteful display of wealth that my mother supervised with military precision each year. I parked my Civic behind a line of luxury vehicles, my car looking distinctly out of place, much like I felt in this home. Balancing my carefully wrapped presents, I made my way to the grand front door. Before I could knock, my mother opened it, her critical gaze sweeping over me. "Sabrina, you're finally here," she said, her voice cool. Her eyes flickered over my vintage coat and combat boots with barely concealed disapproval. "Couldn't you have worn something more appropriate for Christmas? And your hair, darling, it's so well different." I resisted the urge to touch my recently cut bob. "Nice to see you too, Mom," I replied, stepping into the marble foyer that smelled of pine and expensive candles. The house was a showcase of holiday perfection. A 14-foot Fraser fir dominated the living room, decorated exclusively in gold and crystal ornaments that caught the light from the antique chandelier. Garlands of evergreen wrapped with white lights draped the grand staircase, and arrangements of white roses and holly berries sat on every available surface. This wasn't a home during the holidays, it was a designer showcase. I had barely set down my bags when I heard Jessica's laugh echoing from the living room. She made her entrance with Bradley in tow, both looking like they had stepped out of a Ralph Lauren advertisement in matching cashmere sweaters. "Baby sis, you made it," Jessica exclaimed, giving me a perfunctory hug that didn't quite connect. "We were just telling Mom and Dad about the partners' holiday party. The firm flew in a famous chef from New York. It was divine." Bradley offered a stiff handshake. "Sabrina, good to see you. Still doing the photography thing." Before I could answer, my father emerged from his study. "There's my Jessica," he said warmly, embracing my sister. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Hello, Sabrina." My father had aged since I'd seen him last. The lines around his eyes deeper, his hair more silver than brown. Yet he still carried himself with the imposing authority that had intimidated judges and opposing counsel for decades. He gave me a perfunctory pat on the shoulder, careful not to wrinkle his perfectly pressed shirt. Dinner that night was an exercise in restraint. The formal dining room gleamed with candlelight reflecting off the fine china and crystal that had been in my mother's family for generations. Course after course of gourmet food was served by the staff my mother hired for special occasions, while conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. "Jessica just won the Harrington case," my father announced proudly over the main course. "The partners are extremely impressed. Youngest associate to lead such a significant case in the firm's history." My mother beamed. "We always knew you were destined for greatness, darling." Jessica accepted their praise with practiced modesty. "It was a team effort, really," she said, though her smug smile told a different story. "But speaking of good news, Bradley and I have set a date, June 15th at the country club." This announcement prompted excited exclamations from my parents and a flurry of wedding planning discussion. I sat silently moving food around my plate and wondering if anyone would notice if I simply vanished. After 20 minutes of wedding talk, I attempted to share some news of my own. "I actually have some good news too," I ventured during a brief lull. "My documentary on urban food desserts was selected for the Chicago Independent Film Festival." My father frowned slightly. "Is that one of those little art house things?" "It's actually pretty competitive," I explained. "Over 2,000 submissions, and they only accept 40. My mother took a delicate sip of wine. "Well, that sounds interesting, I suppose. Speaking of interesting news, Jessica tells Sabrina about the house you and Bradley are looking at in Lake Forest." Just like that, my achievement was dismissed, and the conversation redirected to Jessica. I caught Bradley giving me a pitying look, which somehow felt worse than my parents' indifference. As the evening progressed, I overheard snippets of conversation between my parents in the kitchen. "Are you sure about Jessica's gift?" my mother asked in a hushed tone. "It's quite extravagant even for us." "Nothing is too good for her," my father replied. "She's earned it with her dedication to the family legacy." I slipped away, wondering what lavish gift awaited my sister this year and whether there would be anything for me beyond the obligatory token present. In my childhood bedroom, everything remained frozen in time, preserved like a museum exhibit of a life I had outgrown. Cheerleading trophies from when I had briefly tried to please my parents by pursuing activities they approved of. Academic awards from before I discovered my passion for photography, and my grades became merely acceptable rather than exceptional. The pale pink walls and white furniture my mother had selected, ignoring my teenage requests for something less precious and more reflective of my personality. I opened my desk drawer and found a stack of old mail, including several college rejection letters. Curiously, I didn't remember receiving these. As I examined the envelopes, I noticed they had been opened and then resealed. Had my father intercepted my mail? I dug deeper and found acceptance letters from art schools that I had never seen, including one offering a substantial scholarship. The realization that my father had hidden these from me, manipulating my options, sent a wave of nausea through me. At the bottom of the drawer, I discovered a small envelope addressed to me in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find a letter dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Sabrina," it began, "I have always seen in you the spark that my son seems determined to extinguish. Your eye for beauty, your compassion for others, your courage to forge your own path. These are gifts. Do not let them convince you that you are less than extraordinary. I have made arrangements for you that Richard cannot interfere with. When the time comes, you will understand. Stay true to yourself, my darling girl. Your path may be harder, but it will be honest and true. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Grandma Eleanor had tried to protect me even after she was gone. What arrangements had she made, and why had this letter been hidden from me? Sleep eluded me that night as I lay in my too soft childhood bed, surrounded by reminders of a person I had never really been. Through the wall, I could hear Jessica on the phone excitedly telling someone about the amazing Christmas surprise that awaited her tomorrow. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what fresh disappointment morning would bring. Christmas dawned bright and clear, sunlight reflecting off the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I dressed carefully in the nicest outfit I had brought, a simple black dress with a vintage silver necklace that had been a gift from Zoe. Making my way downstairs, I braced myself for the annual Christmas ritual. The living room was a picture-perfect holiday scene. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace, Christmas music played softly through the hidden speaker system, and mountains of elegantly wrapped presents surrounded the base of the tree. My parents were already seated on the white sofa, coffee cups in hand, while Jessica and Bradley occupied the love seat. "Finally," Jessica said as I entered. "We've been waiting to start." My mother gestured to an armchair. "Sit, Sabrina. Your father is playing Santa this year." I took my assigned seat, placing my handmade gifts near the tree. My father, wearing a red cashmere sweater that was as close as he ever got to festive attire, began distributing presents with calculated precision. Jessica received box after box of designer clothing, jewelry, and accessories. Each gift was met with theatrical gasps and effusive thanks. Bradley was given an expensive watch and golf clubs that my father assured him were just like mine. My mother unwrapped a diamond bracelet and a spa retreat package. The pile of discarded wrapping paper grew, yet nothing had been passed to me. Finally, my father stood and made a show of looking behind the tree. "And now for our hard-working Jessica, a special surprise to celebrate your achievements this year." He handed her a small box wrapped in silver paper with a tiny red bow. Jessica opened it with a knowing smile, revealing a set of car keys. She squealed with practiced delight. "Let's go see it, shall we?" my father suggested, leading everyone to the front window. There on the circular driveway sat a brand new BMW X5, gleaming white with an enormous red bow on the hood. Its price tag would easily exceed $60,000. "It's perfect," Jessica exclaimed, rushing outside to examine her gift, with Bradley and my parents following. I remained at the window watching their excitement from a distance. When they returned, flushed with excitement and cold air, my father finally reached for a small package. "And for Sabrina," he said, his tone noticeably less enthusiastic. The package was small and wrapped in plain red paper, no bow. I opened it slowly, aware of eyes on me. Inside was a ceramic piggy bank, the kind you might find at a dollar store. It couldn't have cost more than $2. Taped to it was a note in my father's handwriting. "Maybe this will teach you to save for a real career." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica coughed to hide a smirk. Bradley studied his new watch with sudden fascination. My mother sipped her coffee as if nothing unusual had happened. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice hollow. "How thoughtful." My father nodded, oblivious or indifferent to the cruelty of his gesture. "Practical gifts are the most valuable." I sat frozen, the piggy bank heavy in my hands as the morning continued around me. When it was time to open my gifts to them, my mother unwrapped the photo book with a forced smile. "How creative," she said, setting it aside without looking through it. My father merely nodded at his custom leather portfolio with his initials embossed in the corner. Jessica glanced at her framed illustration and murmured a distracted thanks before returning to admiring her new car keys. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of painful moments. The family photo where I was positioned as an afterthought on the edge of the frame. The lavish Christmas dinner where Jessica's dietary preferences were catered to while my vegetarian request had been forgotten. My father's increasingly intoxicated lectures about responsibility and tradition. The breaking point came after dinner when I overheard my parents and Jessica in the study discussing trusts. "We'll set up the fund for Jessica and Bradley's children immediately," my father was saying. "It's important that the next generation of Winthrops are provided for." "What about if Sabrina ever has children?" Jessica asked, though her tone suggested she was merely being polite. My father's laugh was dismissive. "Let's be realistic about the kind of life Sabrina is choosing. I doubt she'll settle down in any conventional way. And even if she did, would we want to encourage more artistic temperaments in the family? No better to focus our resources where they'll be properly appreciated." Words so casually cruel finally shattered any remaining illusion that things could change. In that moment, standing unseen outside the study door, I made my decision. Back in my bedroom, I let the tears flow freely for the first time in years. Not the careful, controlled tears I sometimes allowed myself during therapy sessions, but deep body-shaking sobs that came from a well of pain I had been filling my entire life. The contrast between the $60,000 car and the $2 piggy bank wasn't just about money. It was about value. In their eyes, I had none. When the tears finally subsided, a strange calm settled over me. I reached for my phone and texted Zoe. "You were right. They'll never change." Her response came immediately. "I'm so sorry, Sabrina. What happened?" I gave her the abbreviated version ending with, "I can't do this anymore. I'm done." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet, but I can't stay here another minute." Marcus called while I was still texting with Zoe. His voice was warm with concern. "How's it going with the family? Any Christmas miracles?" I told him about the day, trying to keep my voice steady. His response was predictable. "That's terrible, Sab, but maybe they just don't know how to show affection. Give them a little more time. People can change." "You don't understand, Marcus. This isn't about one bad Christmas. This is my entire life. I can't keep hoping they'll suddenly become different people." "Just don't do anything rash," he cautioned. "Sleep on it. We can talk more when you get back." I ended the call feeling more alone than ever. Even Marcus, with all his good intentions, couldn't truly understand what it was like to be the family disappointment, the perpetual afterthought. As midnight approached, I found myself remembering conversations with Grandma Eleanor. "There comes a point, Sabrina," she had told me once, "when walking away isn't giving up, it's moving forward. Know when that moment comes for you." The house grew quiet as everyone retired to their rooms. I sat on my bed staring at the piggy bank that represented everything my parents thought of me. $2 worth of consideration after 24 years of life. By 2 a.m., my decision was made. I took out a notebook and wrote a letter pouring out years of hurt and disappointment. I explained that I was cutting contact not out of spite but self-preservation. I wrote about the pain of never measuring up, of watching Jessica receive unconditional love while mine came with impossible conditions. I finished by saying I would always love them, but I could no longer allow them to make me feel unworthy of love. I packed quickly, taking only my most essential belongings and photography equipment. Looking around the room one last time, my eyes fell on a family photo from when I was about 10. Jessica, 14, stood between our parents, all of them smiling perfectly. I stood slightly apart, my smile uncertain. Even then, I had known I didn't quite fit. On a sudden impulse, I went to my father's study. The room smelled of leather and expensive scotch, a scent that would forever remind me of disappointment. On his desk sat a crystal paperweight engraved with the family crest, a photo of Jessica in her graduation robes, and a small silver tray that held his keys. Among them were the keys to his prized 1969 Mustang Mach 1, a vintage car he rarely drove but lovingly maintained. The car represented everything he valued, material success preserved and displayed. I hesitated, knowing taking the car crossed a line. But something in me, perhaps Grandma Eleanor's rebellious spirit, made me reach for those keys. I didn't intend to steal the car, not exactly. But I wanted leverage, something to ensure a final conversation on my terms. The car was my father's pride and joy, the one thing besides Jessica that might make him actually notice my absence. Moving silently through the darkened house, I paused at Jessica's door. Should I say goodbye? In the end, I kept walking. Any conversation would only result in her defending our parents and making me doubt my resolve. I glanced at the Christmas tree as I passed the BMW keys, still displayed prominently on the mantel where Jessica had placed them. The contrast with my piggy bank, which I had left on the coffee table, couldn't have been more stark. The garage was cold and smelled of concrete and motor oil. 5 cars lined the space, each more expensive than the last. At the far end, under a custom cover, sat my father's Mustang. I removed the cover carefully, revealing the gleaming black paint and chrome details that my father meticulously maintained. As I slid into the leather driver's seat, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The car started with a powerful rumble that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. I eased it out of the garage and down the driveway, holding my breath until I passed through the gates. Only then, with the mansion's lights receding in the rearview mirror, did I let myself breathe. I drove aimlessly for a while, the powerful engine responding to my every touch, before finding a roadside motel where I could collect my thoughts. After checking in, I blocked my parents' numbers on my phone. Whatever reaction was coming, I needed time to steel myself first. Then I fell into an exhausted sleep, the first decision of my new life made. Morning brought clarity and panic in equal measure. What had I done? I checked my phone temporarily, unblocking my parents to see 15 missed calls and a voicemail from my father. With shaking hands, I played it. Sabrina Elizabeth Winthrop. My father's voice was cold with fury. You have exactly 1 hour to return my car, or I will report it stolen. This childish behavior is precisely why you receive the treatment you do. You have never understood responsibility. Return the car immediately. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, numb. After everything, he cared only about the car. Not why I had left, not the pain that had driven me away, just his possession. Before I could process this, another voicemail notification appeared, this one from an unknown number. I played it cautiously. Ms. Winthrop, this is Harold Jenkins from Jenkins Barrow and Associates. I was your grandmother Eleanor's attorney. I've been trying to reach you for some time regarding your inheritance. The vintage Mustang you are currently in possession of was left to you in her will, along with certain other assets. Your father was instructed to transfer the title to you on your 24th birthday, which I believe was 3 months ago. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. I stared at the phone in disbelief. The car was mine. Grandma Eleanor had left it to me, and my father had hidden this fact, continuing to treat her gift as his own. With trembling hands, I opened the glove compartment. Inside was an envelope yellowed with age. The letter inside, written in my grandmother's familiar hand, made everything clear. Dearest Sabrina, if you're reading this, you've finally claimed what is rightfully yours. This car represents freedom and independence. 2 things I always wanted for you. Your grandfather gave it to me when I was young, and it carried me on adventures your father would never approve of. Now it's yours to take you wherever your heart leads. Richard will fight you on this. He always believed the car should go to him, but my will is clear. Drive away, darling girl, and find the life you deserve. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter. Grandma Eleanor hadn't just given me a car, she had given me permission to leave to seek my own path. She had known somehow that this moment would come. With new resolve, I started the engine and headed toward the one place I knew I would be welcome, Zoe's apartment on the north side of Chicago. When I arrived at Zoe's third-floor walk-up in Wicker Park, she took one look at me, standing in her doorway with my hastily packed bags, and pulled me into a fierce hug. Her purple hair tickled my face as she whispered, "You did it. You actually left." I collapsed onto her threadbare couch, the emotional and physical exhaustion of the past 24 hours finally catching up with me. Between sobs, I told her everything: the car, my grandmother's letter, my father's threatening voicemail. Zoe listened, her expression shifting from shock to anger to fierce protectiveness. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, she helped me secure my remaining belongings from my apartment and deal with the practical aspects of my new reality. When we discovered my parents had frozen the bank account they had access to, Zoe covered my portion of the rent without hesitation. "Consider it an investment in your independence," she insisted when I tried to refuse. Marcus came by after 3 days of increasingly concerned text messages. His reaction was less supportive than I had hoped. "Don't you think you're overreacting?" he asked, pacing Zoe's small living room. "Taking your dad's car was a pretty extreme response to a bad Christmas gift." "It wasn't about the gift," I tried to explain, frustration building. "It was about 24 years of being treated like I don't matter. And the car is legally mine according to my grandmother's will." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I just think family is too important to cut off completely. At least call them, try to work things out." Zoe, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "With all due respect, Marcus, you don't get it. Your family is normal and loving. Hers isn't. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away." Their disagreement created a tension that lingered in the air, highlighting the fundamental difference in our perspectives. Marcus believed in reconciliation at almost any cost, while I was finally accepting that some relationships couldn't and shouldn't be saved. A week after Christmas, my father's firm sent a formal letter demanding the return of the stolen vehicle. I consulted a legal aid attorney who confirmed that if the car was indeed left to me in my grandmother's will, it was legally mine. She advised me to obtain a copy of the will from my grandmother's attorney. Before I could do so, my parents escalated their efforts to regain control. One afternoon, Zoe called me in a panic while I was at a job interview for a photography position at a local magazine. "Your parents are here," she hissed into the phone. "They're in the lobby demanding to see you. The doorman won't let them up, but they're making a scene." I rushed back to find my parents confronting the building manager, my mother's voice carrying through the lobby. "This is ridiculous. We have every right to see our daughter." When they spotted me entering, my father's face flushed with anger. "There she is with my car keys, I assume." "The car is mine," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Grandma Eleanor left it to me in her will." "That's absurd," my father scoffed. "My mother would never have bypassed me for that car. It's been in our family for generations." And from my bag, I produced the letter from the glove compartment. She did, and she explained why. "You were supposed to transfer the title on my 24th birthday. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" My mother stepped forward, lowering her voice to avoid further spectacle. "Sabrina, this behavior is embarrassing. Come home and we can discuss this like adults." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "I'm not coming back. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your love while watching you give it freely to Jessica. I'm done trying." "So dramatic," my mother sighed. "This is exactly the sort of attention-seeking behavior we've come to expect from you." My father's approach was more direct. "Return the car immediately or we'll press charges for theft. Regardless of what my mother may have written in some letter, the title is still in my name." Then I'll fight you in court, I said, surprising myself with my resolve. I'll subpoena Grandma Eleanor's will and show everyone how you violated it. Is that the kind of publicity you want for the firm, Dad? The distinguished Richard Winthrop stealing his daughter's inheritance. The threat of public exposure made him pause. My father's reputation was everything to him. At that moment, Jessica appeared in the lobby entrance, her perfect appearance slightly disheveled for once. "There you are," she said accusingly. "Do you have any idea what you've done to Mom and Dad? Christmas was ruined after your little stunt." "Of course that's what you're worried about," I replied, a sudden wave of pity washing over me for my sister, who had never known any existence outside our parents' expectations. Not why I left, just how it affected the family image. "You've always been selfish," Jessica shot back. "Some of us understand family obligation. Some of us were allowed to be part of the family," I countered. "Others were just tolerated." And the building security guard finally intervened, asking my parents and Jessica to leave. As they were escorted out, my father turned back. "This isn't over, Sabrina. That car is coming back to me one way or another." The encounter left me shaking, but more certain than ever that I had made the right decision. That evening, Marcus came by again, his expression troubled. "Your parents called me," he admitted. "They wanted me to convince you to come home." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "And what did you tell them?" He hesitated. "I said I'd talk to you, try to make you see reason." "Reason?" I repeated, disbelief coloring my voice. "There's nothing reasonable about going back to people who have made it clear they don't value me." "They're still your family, Sabrina," he insisted. "Family is forever." "No Marcus family is supposed to love you unconditionally. They're just people I'm related to by blood, and sometimes that's not enough." Our argument escalated, exposing fundamental differences in our values that I hadn't fully recognized before. When he left that night, we both knew something had irreparably changed between us. The next day I consulted Harold Jenkins, my grandmother's attorney, who confirmed everything. The Mustang was legally mine, along with a modest trust fund my father had been managing supposedly for my benefit. Mr. Jenkins initiated the legal process to transfer the assets to my direct control, free from my father's interference. What surprised me most was when he mentioned, "Your grandfather has been asking about you. He was quite concerned when he couldn't reach you through your parents." "My grandfather?" I asked, confused. "My mother's father died before I was born, and Dad's father when I was a baby." Mr. Jenkins looked equally confused. "No, Alexander Pierce is very much alive. He's your maternal grandmother's second husband. Your mother had a falling out with him decades ago, but he's always maintained an interest in your welfare." This revelation was staggering. A grandfather I had never known existed, another piece of family history deliberately kept from me. Within 2 weeks, my life had transformed completely. I broke up with Marcus, recognizing that his inability to understand my boundaries with my family reflected deeper incompatibilities between us. The magazine hired me as a staff photographer, providing enough income to contribute to expenses at Zoe's while I looked for my own place. And I drove the Mustang feeling Grandma Eleanor's spirit with me on every journey. It wasn't just transportation, it was the first tangible proof that someone in my family had seen me clearly and loved me exactly as I was. 1 month after I left, my father made one last attempt. He came alone to Zoe's building, not with threats, but with something more insidious, the truth. "You remind me of my sister," he said without preamble when I reluctantly agreed to speak with him in the building lobby. "She was like you, artistic, rebellious, unwilling to conform to family expectations." I stared at him in confusion. "I didn't know you had a sister." "Had," he emphasized. "She died when I was in law school. Drug overdose after years of rejecting every attempt to help her. She chose her artistic freedom over family responsibility, and it destroyed her." For the first time, I saw something like vulnerability in my father's eyes. When you were born, you looked just like her. The same eyes, the same stubborn expression. Your mother wanted to name you after her grandmother, but I insisted on Sabrina Sarah's middle name, a memorial of sorts. I struggled to process this revelation. So, you've been punishing me my entire life for resembling an aunt I never knew existed. Not punishing, he corrected, protecting, trying to ensure you didn't follow her path. Every time you defied us, chose the impractical option, pursued this photography obsession, I saw history repeating itself. That's not protection, I said quietly. That's projection. I'm not your sister, Dad, and controlling me out of fear isn't love, it's manipulation. He straightened his shoulders, the brief glimpse of vulnerability vanishing. Your grandmother Eleanor always accused me of the same thing. She enabled Sarah's worst tendencies just as she enabled yours with that car and whatever else she left you. Grandma Eleanor saw me, I replied. She loved me for who I am, not who she wanted me to be. That's the difference. My father's face hardened. Well, you've made your choice clear. Don't expect anything further from us. As he turned to leave, I called after him. I never expected anything, Dad. That's the problem. Watching him walk away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The family secret explained so much about my upbringing, but it didn't excuse it. Understanding the source of their behavior didn't make it any less damaging. That night, I finally looked through the photos I'd taken over the years, images of my family captured through my lens. In each one, I could see what I hadn't recognized before, their fear, and my hope, a disconnect that no gift, expensive or otherwise, could ever bridge. The months that followed my departure from the Winthrop family were both the hardest and most liberating of my life. With Grandma Eleanor's Mustang as my constant companion, I embarked on a journey of rediscovery, both literal and figurative. By February, I had decided to leave Chicago entirely. The city held too many memories, and the constant fear of running into my family or their extensive social circle became exhausting. Portland, Oregon called to me with its vibrant art scene and promise of new beginnings. "You're really doing this," Zoe said as we packed my modest belongings into the Mustang and her battered Honda for the cross-country road trip. "Reinventing yourself 3,000 miles away." "Not reinventing," I corrected. "Just finally becoming who I was always meant to be without their expectations weighing me down." The drive west became a photographic odyssey. I documented small towns and vast landscapes, each image representing another mile between my past and future. Zoe flew back after helping me settle into a tiny studio apartment in Portland's Alberta Arts District, promising to visit often. My financial situation was precarious at first. The trust fund from Grandma Eleanor provided a small safety net, but I was determined to make it on my own merits. I sold some of my equipment, keeping only the essentials, and took on whatever photography gigs I could find, from weddings to product shoots for local businesses. One rainy afternoon in March, I interviewed at Bridgetown Magazine, a local publication focused on arts and culture. The editor, Marlene Hopper, a formidable woman in her 60s, with silver dreadlocks and piercing eyes, scrutinized my portfolio with unnerving intensity. "There's raw talent here," she finally said, "but also pain. Your eye is drawn to outsiders, people on the margins. Why?" Her question caught me off guard. "I guess I understand what it's like not to fit in," I admitted. "To be seen but not really seen." She nodded as if I'd passed some test. "We need a photographer for our Hidden Portland series. It doesn't pay much, but it would be steady work." That assignment became my lifeline. I spent days exploring neglected neighborhoods and documenting the lives of people whose stories rarely made headlines. Marlene became more than an editor, evolving into a mentor who pushed me to dig deeper, to find the truth in every frame. My therapy continued via video sessions with Dr. Levine, who helped me navigate the complex emotions that surfaced as I established my new life. Grief doesn't only apply to death, she reminded me. You're grieving the family you wished you had, the relationship that might have been. The panic attacks began in April, typically in the middle of the night. I would wake gasping for breath, convinced I was back in my parents' house, trapped in their expectations. On the worst nights, I would drive the Mustang along the Columbia River, watching the sunrise and reminding myself that I was free. My sister Jessica's wedding approached in June, an event I learned about only through social media. Her carefully curated posts showed a perfect engagement, a perfect venue, a perfect dress. What they didn't show was any acknowledgement of my absence. In the family narrative, it seemed I had been neatly excised, a problem solved through deletion. The temptation to check my family's social media became an addiction I struggled to break. Each perfect image, each celebration I wasn't part of, reopened wounds I was trying to heal. Eventually, I asked Zoe to change my passwords and block their accounts, a digital amputation that proved surprisingly effective. In July, an unexpected email arrived from Jessica. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk." The message itself was a masterpiece of justification. While I don't condone how you left, I understand you felt overlooked. However, you need to understand the pressure I've been under as the responsible one. Mom and Dad have always expected perfection from me while you were free to pursue your interests. Your dramatic exit has made things even harder for me. They question everything I do now, afraid I'll pull a Sabrina. If you'd just apologize and return the car, we could move past this. My response was brief but firm. I'm not apologizing for claiming what's legally mine or for protecting my mental health. The car stays with me. I hope someday you'll understand that their treatment of me wasn't a privilege but a form of neglect. I wish you happiness in your marriage and career, but I can't be part of a family that sees me as an inconvenience. As summer turned to fall, I began establishing new traditions and connections. A community of artists and photographers welcomed me into their fold, people who valued creativity and authenticity over status and appearance. For the first time, I felt seen for who I truly was. My first holiday season away from the Winthrop family loomed as both a challenge and an opportunity. Thanksgiving had always been a performance at my parents' house, a showcase of wealth and status rather than gratitude. In my tiny Portland apartment, I hosted a potluck for fellow holiday orphans, people who, for various reasons, couldn't or wouldn't spend the day with biological family. The mismatched dishes, the laughter, the genuine warmth of that gathering healed something in me. As we went around the table, sharing what we were thankful for, I realized I was grateful for the $2 piggy bank that had finally shown me the truth about my family's values and the courage to walk away. December brought unexpected news. A gallery owner who had seen my hidden Portland photos invited me to participate in a group show focused on urban identity and belonging. I worked feverishly to create a series titled Invisible Portraits of People Who Felt Unseen in Their Own Environments. The opening night of the exhibition marked a turning point in my career. Art critics from local publications praised the emotional honesty of my work. 3 pieces sold, including the most expensive one, a triptych of an elderly woman on her stoop, watching the neighborhood change around her. The gallery owner approached me at the end of the evening. "The buyer of your triptych would like to meet you. He was quite moved by your artist's statement about visibility and belonging." Curious, I followed her to a corner of the gallery where an elderly man in an impeccably tailored suit stood studying my photographs. Something about his posture, the way he held himself with quiet dignity, seemed vaguely familiar. "Ms. Winthrop," the gallery owner said, "this is Alexander Pierce." The name hit me like a physical blow. My unknown grandfather, my mother's stepfather, standing before me after all these years. "You look so much like your grandmother," he said softly, his voice rich with emotion. "She would be proud of what you've created here." And we moved to a quiet cafe nearby where Alexander filled in the missing pieces of my family history. He had married my maternal grandmother when my mother was a teenager. Their relationship had been strained from the beginning, with my mother resenting his presence in their aristocratic household. "Your mother was devoted to her father's memory," he explained. She saw my marriage to her mother as a betrayal, though her father had been gone for 5 years. When she met your father in college, she saw an opportunity to recreate the kind of traditional, prestigious household she remembered from early childhood. "Why didn't you ever contact me directly?" I asked, still processing this new information. Alexander's eyes, the same shade of green as mine, filled with regret. "I tried many times. When you were young, your mother made it clear that I wasn't welcome in your life. As you got older, I sent birthday cards, graduation gifts, all returned. I hired investigators to keep me informed about your life, which is how I knew about your photography. When I saw your name on the exhibition announcement, I knew I had to come. So you bought my photograph." "I would have bought them all," he admitted with a small smile. "But I didn't want to seem overzealous. I followed your work for years through social media and the small publications you've been featured in. You have her eye, your grandmother's gift for seeing beyond the surface." Learning about this connection to my grandmother, a woman I had never known, but who had apparently passed down her artistic talent, was overwhelming. Alexander and I agreed to meet again to slowly build a relationship free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my childhood. As Christmas approached, I received a legal notice that my parents were contesting Grandma Eleanor's will, specifically my ownership of the Mustang. Their argument was based on a technicality claiming that, as the executor of Eleanor's estate, my father had the right to determine when and how assets were distributed. I forwarded the notice to Harold Jenkins, who assured me the claim had little legal merit. "It's a harassment tactic," he explained. "They know they can't win, but they can make the process painful and expensive." To my surprise, Alexander offered to help with legal expenses. "Consider it 24 years of missed birthday and Christmas gifts," he said when I hesitated. "I wasn't allowed to support you then. Allow me this now." On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the $2 piggy bank incident, I drove Grandma Eleanor's Mustang to the Oregon coast. The Pacific stretched before me, vast and unchanging, as I parked at a scenic overlook. I had brought the piggy bank with me, kept as a reminder of why I had left. Over the year, I had filled it not with coins but with small notes, each one documenting a personal victory or moment of growth since walking away from my family. I read through them now, sitting in the car that had become both my escape vehicle and my inheritance. First solo apartment. Gallery showing accepted. Stood up to Dad in the lobby. Made Thanksgiving dinner for friends. Met Alexander. As the sun set over the ocean, I realized that the piggy bank my father had intended as an insult had transformed into something powerful, a record of my journey to independence. The $2 container now held something priceless, the story of my liberation. 2 years after walking away from the Winthrop name and all it represented, I stood in the doorway of my new house in Portland's St. John's neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion, by any means a modest craftsman with a front porch and backyard studio, but it was entirely mine, purchased with the proceeds from my first photography book and a successful documentary series. "Quite a change from that first tiny studio," Zoe commented as she helped me arrange furniture. She had finally made good on her promise to visit, taking a 2-week vacation from her thriving tattoo business in Chicago. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real," I admitted, running my hand along the vintage banister. "That I get to define success on my own terms." In the driveway sat Grandma Eleanor's Mustang, recently restored to its original glory. The restoration had been a joint project with Jake, a mechanic I'd met when the car developed engine trouble on a photography road trip. What had begun as a professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. Jake's warm, boisterous family had welcomed me without reservation or judgment, showing me what healthy family dynamics look like. His father taught me basic car maintenance. His mother insisted I join their Sunday dinners, and his sisters treated me like one of their own. Through them, I learned that family could be a source of support rather than stress. My relationship with Alexander Pierce had also flourished. At 78, he remained sharp and engaged, eager to make up for lost time. He shared stories about my maternal grandmother's artistic pursuits and showed me her paintings, helping me understand where my creative inclinations originated. The knowledge that I came from a line of artists, not just ambitious lawyers and social climbers, healed something fundamental in my sense of identity. My career had taken an unexpected turn when a short documentary I created about family estrangement went viral online. The film, which featured interviews with people who had made the difficult decision to cut ties with toxic family members, struck a chord with viewers who had faced similar choices. This success led to an invitation to speak at a psychology conference about the impact of familial rejection and the process of creating chosen family. As I prepared my presentation, I received an unexpected email from the conference organizer. "We've had a late registration from a Richard and Diana Winthrop who indicated they are related to you. We wanted to check if this presents any concerns before confirming their attendance." The names on my screen sent a shock through my system. My parents attending my presentation. After 2 years of silence broken only by legal maneuvering, why would they suddenly want to hear me speak? After consultation with my therapist, I decided not to object to their presence. "This is your moment," Dr. Levine reminded me. "Your story to tell." Their presence doesn't change that. The day of the conference dawned clear and bright. Jake drove me to the venue, his steady presence a calming influence. "Remember, you've built a life they can't touch," he said, squeezing my hand before I headed backstage. From behind the curtain, I scanned the audience and spotted them immediately. My father's silver hair and rigid posture, my mother's perfect coiffure and designer outfit. They sat near the back, expressions unreadable from this distance. When I was introduced, I walked to the podium with a confidence that would have been impossible 3 years ago. My presentation traced the psychological impact of conditional love and the societal pressure to maintain family relationships regardless of their toxicity. I shared research and statistics, but also personal stories, including elements of my own. The $2 piggy bank sitting beside a $60,000 car wasn't just about material disparity, I explained to the rapt audience. It was the crystallization of years of being told I wasn't enough, that my value was conditional on conforming to expectations that denied my authentic self. Throughout my speech, I never directly looked at my parents, but I was acutely aware of their presence. When the presentation concluded, I received a standing ovation. As people lined up to speak with me afterward, I noticed my parents lingering at the edges of the crowd. Eventually, they approached. My mother looked older, fine lines around her eyes that her expensive creams couldn't quite erase. My father seemed diminished, somehow less imposing than in my memory. "Your presentation was quite impressive," my father said, his tone formal. "You've become quite accomplished in your field." "Thank you," I replied simply, maintaining professional courtesy. My mother's gaze darted around, taking in my modest but stylish attire, my confident posture. "You look well," she offered. "We've seen your work in several publications. Your name seems to be gaining recognition." The subtext was clear. Now that I was achieving success by conventional standards, perhaps I was worth acknowledging again. The validation I had once desperately craved from them now felt hollow and irrelevant. "Is there something specific you wanted to discuss?" I asked directly. "It's been 2 years since you threatened legal action over Grandma Eleanor's car." My father cleared his throat. "We've been advised to drop that matter. Our counsel believes the case has little merit. Additionally, your sister has suggested that our approach to your situation may have been well counterproductive." Jessica's influence in this surprising development intrigued me. We had maintained minimal contact, occasional emails that were civil, if not warm. She had recently given birth to her first child, a daughter, and the experience seemed to have shifted her perspective on family dynamics. "I appreciate that information. I said, neither accepting nor rejecting the implied olive branch. "If you'll excuse me, I have other attendees waiting to speak with me." As they moved away, I felt a weight lifting. They no longer had the power to devastate me with their disapproval or conditional acceptance. I had built a life based on authentic connections and meaningful work, not the acquisition of status or material wealth. Later that evening, I met with Jessica privately at her hotel. She had come without Bradley, and something in her seemed different, less polished and perfect than I remembered. "Motherhood changes things," she said, showing me pictures of baby Eleanor named after our grandmother in a gesture that surprised me. "It makes you think about what you want to pass down, what cycles you want to break." And we talked cautiously at first, then more openly about our shared childhood and divergent paths. Jessica admitted to envying my freedom even as she had judged my choices. "I followed the script perfectly," she confessed, "and I'm not unhappy exactly, but sometimes I wonder who I would be if I'd been allowed to choose my own path the way you eventually did." "It wasn't without cost," I reminded her. "Walking away meant rebuilding everything from scratch." "But you did rebuild," she pointed out. "On your terms. That takes courage I'm not sure I have." We parted with a tentative agreement to stay in touch, not as the Winthrop sisters defined by our parents' dynamics, but as two women finding our own way forward. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, more like the possibility of a new relationship untethered from the past. The following weekend, I invited my chosen family to my new home for a housewarming celebration. Zoe, Jake and his family, Alexander, my colleagues from the magazine, and friends from the Portland arts community filled the rooms with laughter and genuine warmth. In my studio, I had created a special display photographs chronicling my journey from that Christmas night to the present. The centerpiece was the $2 piggy bank, now sitting atop a custom pedestal with an engraved plaque reading, "The Price of Freedom." As I looked around at the people who had chosen to love me for exactly who I was, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for that painful Christmas gift. Without it, I might never have found the courage to leave to seek a life defined by authenticity rather than appearance. Jake found me lost in thought and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. I smiled, leaning back against him. "I was just thinking about worth, how we measure it, how we recognize it in ourselves when others don't." Later, as the gathering wound down, I took Grandma Eleanor's Mustang for a sunset drive along the river. The powerful engine hummed beneath me, a reminder of the woman who had seen my worth and provided the means for my escape when the time came. I thought about how far I had come from that Christmas night 2 years ago, driving away in tears and uncertainty. The road hadn't been easy, but it had led me here to a life that reflected my true self rather than someone else's expectations. The piggy bank that was meant to shame me had instead become a symbol of my transformation. The $2 that represented how little they valued me had multiplied into a life rich with genuine connections and meaningful work. As I parked in front of my new home, I made a silent promise to the young woman who had driven away that Christmas night, terrified but determined. I would never again accept being undervalued or overlooked. I would continue building a life where my worth wasn't measured by others' expectations, but by my own integrity and authenticity. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone to find your true worth? I hope my story resonates with those of you who have faced similar crossroads. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story touched you, consider subscribing to hear more journeys of self-discovery and resilience. Remember, sometimes the most painful rejections lead us to our most authentic lives. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and I wish you the courage to define your own worth regardless of what others try to tell you it should be.